So Shawn Hebert and Bruce Firestone are here on September 15th, and we're about to talk about two things on the agenda. The first thing was a project that's still, I think, confidential in Thunder Bay involving hockey and arenas and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to that discussion. And the other thing that you asked was about how to create your own waterfront, which I've been doing for probably 30 years or more.
Yeah.
And if it's okay with you, Shawn, I thought because it'll be a little quicker, we could deal with the second one first.
Sure.
All right. So just before we got on the call, I booted up some stuff that I've been doing for quite some time. And I'll just share my screen with you. And some of it you've already seen. Hang on a sec. Excuse me.
Wow.
You can't get COVID through Zoom. So this is probably the biggest, it is the biggest pond I've ever created. And this particular pond was an old sand pit that I owned.
Okay.
And what I was required to do by the Ministry of Natural Resources was to extract over 1 million tons of sand before they would consider the sand pit license exhausted. And so I asked them for permission if I could go down instead of out, and so I could fulfill those requirements, because what had happened was over here is a wetlands, okay? So can you see my cursor moving around?
Yeah.
Yeah, so over here is the wetlands, and there's actually, my oldest son and I, we were hiking through that bush in late winter, early spring, and we discovered an artesian well there. And this whole area is very sandy. It's like a beautiful 70 or 80 foot sand layer that was laid down at the end of the last ice age 10,000 years ago. So what I did was I borrowed from a friend of mine, Bill Carson, I borrowed one of his big diesel electric shovels, and we put it in the middle of what is now Dunrobin Lake, and we dug down 25 or 30 feet with the big boom, and we found this beautiful, beautiful emerald green water filtered through, we think, about 7,000 meters of sand. So you've got these underground springs.
Unreal.
And so over the next 17 years, we excavated 1.1 million tons going down. And we left this little island here, which we call Windward Island, unexcavated, just so we'd have a little feature there. And you can see that we put in a few other ponds as well. So when you have the right soil conditions and you have the right underground water conditions, underground water, you can create really beautiful ponds. So this is what it looks like today. This is one of my boys fishing here. He's on Windward Island. We put largemouth bass in the lake, Shawn. It keeps the lake really clean. You need a permit to transport live fish, but we got that, and we moved the fish into the lake, and they have thrived. And the reason I've got Lady Di on the screen here is because I put the day that I seeded the lake with largemouth bass was the day that Lady Diana died.
Oh.
So I call the largemouth bass in our lake, I call it the Lady Di fish. And so you can see down here at the bottom of the screen, we have some really quite beautiful homes that we built around the lake. Here's some other ponds that we dug. This is a barn that I built in the 1990s. It has a pond. This is another pond I dug for a client of mine. So one of the things that I do is, if I have the right conditions, I'll go on to a property. This particular property in the top left is about 5 acres, and this pond is probably about an acre. It's only about 8 to 10 feet deep, but we dig it out, and you could dig out a half-acre pond in about 2 to 3 weeks. 1 acre pond is probably about 5 weeks, and it cost me, just so you know, it cost me about $3,500 a week these days to hire an excavator, with the diesel and with the operator. So if you're doing a small pond of a half an acre and it takes you 2 or 3 weeks, it's probably $7,000 to $10,000 to do it.
Right.
If you're doing an acre pond and it takes you 5 weeks, it's probably closer to $18,000 or $20,000 to do it.
Can I ask you a question, Bruce? Like, when you're pushing the fill, the dirt, the sand, like, is the water not coming up underneath? Like, how do you?
Yes, it is. That's exactly right. So what happens is your big shovel, your big diesel electric shovel, sits on the shore, and it hauls out the material. And,
Wow.
and certainly it's just like when you were at the beach, when you were a kid, you dig down, oh, look, there's water there. The first time you did it when you were 3 years of age, you went, I've uncovered water, mom, have a look, but it was only, 6 or 8 inches down. So you dig down and you're digging through. So the operator has to be very patient, right? So he literally sits there,
right,
hour after hour, day after day, until that area is excavated, and then he moves. And you also have to be careful. You have to have a good operator that he doesn't tip it into the lake.
Yeah. What's the process to go through, like, not only do you have to find the land that is sandy, as you described, but then you go to the municipality and then buy the land and tell them your intent?
I'll talk about that in a minute. So here are my 2 boys when they were younger, fishing at Dunrobin Lake. This is a mini storage business that I own. This one here on the right. And you're going to laugh about this. This is a rural business that I owned. It was called Blue Heron Storage.
Okay.
And we are required in Ontario, I don't know what it is like in Manitoba, but we're required in Ontario to have, I think, 2 10,000 gallon or 20,000 gallons of firefighting water on site.
Right.
And so what I did was I got permission to dig a pond. This one wasn't in sand. This was in clay, but there was lots of surface water. And so instead of having to install, 2 10,000 gallon tanks, I dug a pond, which is beautiful. And I have a dry fire hydrant, if you know what that is.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so it means it goes down under the frost and goes into the pond. So this pond would have several million gallons of water in it. So I got the fire marshal and the building code people to approve it, and that's the firefighting. So it wasn't really any cheaper, I don't think, or maybe it was a little less expensive, but it turns out it's a beautiful feature and it works great. In fact, this particular pond on the top right not only serves Blue Heron storage, it serves the entire village. Because of the fire hydrant there. And that's enough of that. So let me get out of this one. And so here's a couple of things that you need to know. All right. So this was a project that we were doing. I was doing for a client of mine. This is on a major road in Ontario. It's called Roger Stevens Drive. And my client was severing off 3 lots on this side of the street and 3 lots on this side of the street.
Okay.
So what I did was I just looked at Google Maps, and what I did was I noticed around Roger Stevens Drive there were lots of low-lying areas. And so these are naturally formed ponds. And so I said to my client, Scott Lackey was his name. I said, Scott, I think if you dig down, you will find that you can create water. And so at that time, it would be more expensive today. At that time, lots like this, these would be 2 to 3 acre rural lots, would sell for about $65,000 each. Today, it would be probably $165,000, be $100,000 more. But what I suggested to him is we should experiment and see if we can dig some ponds that will sustain themselves. And if you do that, instead of getting $65,000 for that lot back then, we would have gotten about $130,000. Today, instead of getting $165,000, he'd probably get about $225,000. So you invest, anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 in, and you basically created your own waterfront. Okay. So Scott looked at the aerial photographs with me, and we looked for low-lying areas. And I'm not as familiar, obviously, with the Manitoba geology and geography and underground water systems, but I suspect it's not that much different from Ontario, but I really don't know. So you'd have to ask somebody who really knows. But you could just look at Google Maps. And so it was interesting to me, Shawn, that a lot of the people that I deal with, realtors and investors and people like you who are entrepreneurial as hell, they would see that some of the lands are zoned EP3, environmental protection 3, or whatever, and they would run away. Those are the lots that I would buy. So I was buying lots this is in the 90s and the early 2000s. I was buying rural lots that no one else wanted for $35,000. But during the conditional period, what I would do is instead of getting a big diesel electric shovel, which is pretty expensive, you have to float it in, I'd get some local guy with a backhoe. And he would drive onto the property and go into the low-lying areas, because that's what I was buying. And with an extender boom on a backhoe, you can dig probably it's 12 feet for sure, but maybe 14 feet. So we would dig test pits. And we would leave them open with permission of the owner, of course. We'd leave them open for, a few days and sometimes a couple of weeks to watch the behavior of the water. Do they fill up with water? Is the water table sustainable? Does it shift? When it rains, what happens to it? So you go out every day, and you do have to put safety fence around it, because you don't want one of the local kids falling in and then maybe not being able to get out.
Right.
But when I found the right conditions, I would buy an 8-acre property that no one else wanted. Probably 3 acres of it was zoned RU. The rest of it was zoned environmental protection, or it was even zoned, a floodplain. To me, that was good news. To everybody else, it was horrible. So I would then go on, I would dig a pond for say $15,000. My cost might have been 50 grand. And I'd sell that lot back then for $165,000.
Right. Interesting. So Dunrobin Lake is how big?
It's 22 acres.
22 acres. Okay.
Yeah, see if I can find it again. Yeah, it's a fair size. This is the biggest one I've built or done. But most of my ponds are anywhere from a half an acre to, some of them are 6 or 7 acres, but Dunrobin Lake is 22.
And then is that one just for your family's use, or are you actually severing off like titles and building lots?
We built around about 50 homes around the lake.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I was a developer back then. I don't do much development work now. I do a little bit, but not very much. And so this was, first of all, I sold the sand. I think I was getting $1.05 a ton for it. And I excavated 1.1 million tons. So I got a little bit of money for the sand.
Wow.
And then, of course, we sold lots and built houses. So, this was a project that generated, many millions of dollars.
Cool.
Now, in terms of permission, in Ontario, you can dig a half-acre pond on your property without permission of the Ministry of Natural Resources. You don't need to ask anybody. So, but somehow or other, I have to admit, Shawn, somehow or other, I have to admit that some of those ponds got bigger than half an acre.
Sure.
I never once asked for permission ever. And I did get caught once. I don't know how many ponds I've done, but it's in the many dozens, I guess. Yeah. And one time, I guess a neighbor complained, and somebody from the Ministry of Natural Resources came out. He had full body armor on. I think he was armed. And I wasn't on site. My youngest son, Matthew, was on site, supervising. And the guy scared the bejesus out of Matthew. And he said, well, Matthew was just a teenager, maybe 17 or 18. Yeah. And so he calls me up, and I said, Matt, can I talk to the officer? And I said, officer, Matthew's just a teenager, and he's not responsible. I am. Can I meet you on site tomorrow? So I went out the next day, and he said, Mr. Firestone, this is much bigger than a half an acre. I said, yeah, I know that. And he said, well, I'm going to have to fine you for doing this. And I said, oh, okay, I understand that. I said, however, I would put my environmental record up against anybody in Canada or the United States. I'm a good steward of these lands. When I open up these ponds, these are ponds for fish and fowl and wildlife, and I've got turtles, I've got largemouth bass in these ponds. I see the deer here, the wolves come and water here. The bird life is abundant. I'm a good steward of the lands. Well, he said, I'm still going to have to fine you, Mr. Firestone, for this. And I said, well, before you do, can I show you the 7 other ponds that I've built in the neighborhood? He said, what? Yeah, I said, I've done 7 others. So if you're going to fine me for one, why don't you fine me for all the rest? And by this time, he was laughing. Yeah. And so I said, come on, let's go. And so I showed him all the other ponds. That was about 15 years ago. I never heard from him again.
Really?
Yeah. So I've said this to you before, Shawn, that I can't coach people not to follow the bylaws to the letter.
Yeah.
But at least speaking for myself, the amount of time it would take to get permission to dig one of these ponds, they would require studies. Biologists would have to study it, and environmentalists, I suppose, and they'd have all kinds of requirements. It would probably take 2 years. It would probably cost me $50,000 or $60,000 in studies, and then they might say no.
Mm-hmm.
So for myself, when I think it's appropriate, I will dig a pond. Half an acre, as I said, is perfectly fine. But when you get enough, for a 22-acre pond like this, I had a license. Okay, but for the smaller ponds, the half acre to the 1 or even 2-acre ponds, I just dig them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I really like it. Thanks for sharing that. I'd be interested to see. I mean, you go on Google Map and search certain areas. I know there's areas in Manitoba called the Sandy Lands, which is very sandy. Manitoba in general, they say is quite swampy. Like I know where I built my mini storage property, like we had tons of fill.
I remember that.
Yeah, which was an oversight on my part. I mean, whatever, of the countless mistakes I made. But,
yeah, well, between you and me, we probably made them all.
Yeah. So, but in any event, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting exercise to poke around at. I think it's something I would love to do for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, you need to, look around and basically, it really probably wasn't my model. It was something I learned from a vet. He was both a veterinarian and he was a Canadian Armed Forces veteran who served in World War II. He was I think a heavily decorated soldier. And when he came back from the war, he wanted to build his own animal pharmaceutical business, distribution business, distributing not pet food, but pharmaceuticals for pets. And but he didn't have any money for startup. So what he did was he bought up the properties that no one else wanted. And in those days, we're talking about the 50s and 60s, he was buying property, for $70 an acre.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that over the next couple of years, he bought 3,000 acres of land that no one else wanted. Back then they were just called swamplands, right? Today they're called wetlands, but back then it was swampy land. Nobody else wanted it. And then he went to the bank and he said, I'm a major landowner. I own 3,000 acres. And he was able to get a loan to start his pharma distribution business. And then I got to know him in the 80s. When he came to me in the 90s, and he said, well, I've got these 3,000 acres of useless, swampland that I've owned for, 30 or 40 years. And he became a very wealthy man based on, he sold his farmer distribution business eventually and had a lot of money. He said, I'm getting to the age where I'm going to get rid of it. So can you sell it for me? And I said, sure, let me have a look at it. So he gives me this spreadsheet with, property after property after property, thousands of acres.
Wow.
In that 30-year period, Shawn, people had completely changed their view of what is desirable. What used to be called swampland and just garbage land now became very desirable. So when we sold that 3,000 acres, I don't know the exact amount, but we probably got $7 or $8 million for them.
Wow.
Because, people would build beautiful homes that had views of wetlands, and people just happened to like that.
Yeah,
so it was a wonderful model, and I thought, gee, I think I could do that.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
There you go. And you've got it on tape now, so you can always come back and refresh your memory if you need to.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so tell me what's going on in Thunder Bay.
Well, listen, I grew up in Thunder Bay, and I feel like over the years, hockey being like a religion in Thunder Bay, and over the years, Thunder Bay's lost teams, with just for a few reasons. I think the old junior league they used to play in, they were the only Canadian team in it, which was the USHL, which is the premier US college sort of scouted league in North America right now. But in any event, they used to be part of that league. And then It's kind of just a little too far away to be part of the OHL, you know?
Yeah, it's too far out.
It seems like it's a little too far away to be, to be traveled to. But I think what the sort of the opportunity therein lies is a sports and entertainment facility in Thunder Bay. So if we look at our neighbors to the south in Duluth, Minnesota, they've got this wonderful facility where they run their college hockey team out of. And then it's an event center. So conventions, all this stuff, right? So Thunder Bay doesn't have that. They've got aging facilities.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So it's got to be a destination, kind of like almost in the same vein as what brought Winnipeg back to the NHL. You know, the Chipman Group made the arena a very busy arena that happened to have hockey playing out of it as well, right? So I think any idea has to start with an opportunity and a need, and I think there's an opportunity and a need. But putting the pieces together from, the city council, getting them on board, the province wasn't able to commit to, I think it was I want to say it was about a $200 million endeavor.
Yeah, something like that.
To do it. So I guess, Bruce, where I'm coming from is like, where would you start, putting the pieces together? And I can tell you what I'm thinking, if you want me to, or if you want to go.
I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I mean, I think firstly, I want to go back to Thunder Bay and start talking to some of the people who voted it down and just understand why, right? What the economics were, such that if we need to raise more money, then at least I know what I'm dealing with. But if it's other factors, I need to understand those factors. After that, I have a strong relationship with the hockey community in Thunder Bay. So some of the guys who are running a lot of the premier, the AAA teams that are feeding all these guys to the NHL that go away to play in the OHL or go play in the Western League or the US college route, these guys are still there, that I played with and played against. So having a sense of how to tie in their programs to a facility like this, because right now they're working out of all their own independent facilities that are not to the level of, I think, where it could be as far as developing stronger programs. Then there's also the university. So Lakehead University has a strong hockey team, and they're doing some renovations right now. But I think there could also be like a collegiate tie-in to this facility.
Would there be an anchor tenant?
Yeah, so that's my other idea. Is like there isn't a prominent junior hockey team, but also, I don't know if you read those articles I sent you. The Manitoba Moose were looking at moving to the Thunder Bay area, which would be perfect for them in terms of proximity to, bring their guys up and down to the Jets.
Yeah, well, the Senators moved their team, their AHL affiliate, to Belleville.
Right, which is close, right?
Yeah, it's 2.5 hours down the road.
Yeah, so I think as far as an anchor tenant, yeah, if we could get the Manitoba Moose there, that would be wonderful. But I think having sort of it vertically integrated where you could have a junior program and maybe the university program run out of there. But I think to make it profitable, you need like the Briar, you need the Scotties, you need like things coming through town. So you can't soak it up with too many hockey events. It needs to be a busy entertainment facility.
All right, so let me give you my 2 cents. First of all, in terms of how to start, who controls the site in Thunder Bay right now?
Well, it's right now. It was a proposed site that is just, it's all like it's a different use at the moment.
Yeah, but who owns it?
I don't know.
Well, then Shawn, take a note. Find out.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So who owns it? That's question number one. You need to. How big is the site?
It's all downtown waterfront. So it's quite large. Like, I think it's like right now it's all retail and old, old residential. So it would be completely new build, completely new site where they were proposing it.
Yeah.
So the
what you
size,
need is
I want to say it's 20 blocks.
Yeah, but so you need to know who owns the site and how big it is in terms of square feet, and you need a little map. Say, okay, Bill Smith owns this, and Jane Jones owns that, and these are the areas that we're looking at. So that would be the first question. The second thing is, and you know this because you're a real estate guy as well as a wild ass entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Second thing would be to come to some agreements with the current ownership to allow you to represent them in this new project, because he or she who controls the land, that's it. So you don't have to buy these things, but what I did when I wanted to build the Canadian Tire Center, and I'll just show you, let's see if I've got that here. Yeah, I'll share my screen with you. So this is the Canadian Tire Center here in Ottawa, and you can see it's on a main highway. It's called the Queensway, or Highway 417. And if you go down this direction far enough, you'll hit Winnipeg. If I want to come visit you, just keep going west. All right, so I'll just go to the satellite view now, okay? So here's the satellite view. And what I did was I went out in 1989 and 1990, and I wrote up option agreements and agreements of purchase and sale for 600 acres, okay? So this is where the Canadian Tire Center is here. Can you sort of see it on the screen?
Yeah.
So that's 100 acres. And this is where the Palladium Auto Park is. That's another 100 acres. This is where the Tanger Mall is. And that's about, I guess, about 200 acres. And then this is a new residential community, which is probably about another 150 acres. So I had either options to buy or actual agreements of purchase and sale to buy 600 acres. So at that point, I controlled probably the best, or one of the top three anyway, development sites in Ottawa. And I controlled enough land, Shawn, to build this interchange. Can you see the interchange here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't want to have to negotiate with any adjoining landowner. I owned all 600 acres, either under agreement of purchase and sale or an option agreement. In your case, you would talk to the owners and say, look, I'd like to have an option for a couple of years on your property. How about I give you $5,000 a year for 2 years? I give you 10 grand. And we'll see what happens. Something. You have to give them some money, I suppose, but hopefully not too much. All right. But once you have control of a site, then the next thing that you would do is you would but I did that without asking anybody. I didn't ask the National Hockey League, hey, are you guys going to expand? Can I get an expansion franchise?
Right.
I didn't go to the city of Ottawa and say, hey, would you mind rezoning 600 acres? I just bought the land, or optioned the land, and I just quietly put the land together.
Okay.
After I had that land together, then I talked to the city, and I talked to the National Hockey League. So what I did next was, what I would do next once you have control of the land is I would talk to the Manitoba Moose, and I would talk to the council. But now people are sure as hell going to listen to you.
Right.
Because, nobody can cut you off at the knees at that point. And maybe you've spent a little bit of time and money on it. If things don't go well, you don't exercise the options. So an option agreement has a specific price. I have an option to buy this property, for $1 million or whatever it is, within the next 2 years. And here's $5,000 that allows me to tie it up for a year, and another $5,000 a year from now to tie it up for another year. And then if I don't close within 2 years, you can sell it to somebody else.
Exactly. Okay.
So once you have tied up the land, you're in control of the process. Then you have discussions with the city, with the Manitoba Moose, with all your buddies, hockey buddies in Thunder Bay. The other thing that I would do to speak the language of the Manitoba Moose is I would say to the Manitoba Moose, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to build a, you know, I would think for the Manitoba Moose, are we talking about an 8,000 or 10,000 seat arena, something like that?
Max, yeah.
Yeah, so let's say it's at 8,000. I think 5,000 is too small and 15,000 is way too big. So probably 8,000 people.
Yeah.
I would say to the Manitoba Moose, we're going to start a season ticket campaign in Thunder Bay, and we're going to try and sell, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 season tickets. And the other thing I would put into my arena is, I'm going to show you this picture. This is the inside of the Canadian Tire Centre here. Can you see all the suites here?
Yeah.
There's 3 rings of suites here. You know what a suite is, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So there's 3 rings of suites. One very close to the center ice or ice level, one a little further away, and then one up in the rafters, which is furthest away. These ones up here, they rent for about 100 or 150,000 a year per suite. Probably have 12 people in them. These are probably closer to 200,000 a year, and these down here are probably 250,000. And just so you know, in the Ottawa Civic Centre, where the Ottawa 67s play, I built, I think, 44 suites like that. And for this is for the junior team.
Yeah.
And it has been a lifeline for the junior team. So if you promise the Manitoba Moose, number one, with your permission, we're going to sell, you know, you can collect, you know, $100 for a pair of season tickets. Just it's a refundable deposit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, if we could sell 6,000 season tickets, you know, we'll take $50 a ticket as a refundable deposit. And if you move your team here, you've got 6,000 season tickets. But if we also built you like they did, like Firestone did in the Civic Center downtown Ottawa, he built 44 suites for the junior team.
Yeah.
You know, we'll pre-lease those too. And they don't rent as, they're not as expensive at the junior level as they are at the you know, at the NHL level. But you know, for the AHL, if you had 42 or 44 suites there and you rented, say, 35 of them, you know, you would that would, and those leases are for multiple year commitments, right? Those we did 5 and 10 year commitments. So they're, you know, and there's plenty of companies in Thunder Bay that probably would do that. Yeah. And then they're committed for 5 or 10 years. So that's a big help to the Moose, and of course a big help to you as the building owner. Okay.
So this, sorry to interrupt you, but this sounds silly, but like that revenue for the suites, does that go to me or does that go to the Moose?
Well, what we do is we share the revenues.
Okay.
All right. So some of it goes downtown, some of it goes to the 67s. You know the Ottawa 67s, right? Junior 18? Yeah. So some of it goes to the 67s and some of it goes to the city. Out here, when I ran the Canadian Tire Centre and the Senators, it didn't really matter because we owned the building, we owned the team.
Right.
But there would be a sharing of the revenues. You know, you as the building owner, you know, you need some of those revenues, but so do the Manitoba Moose.
Totally, yeah.
All right. So you know, I mean, we could work that out, but right now I'm just going for the general sort of high level stuff. Then the next thing you do is you have tremendous opportunities to develop a sponsorship program. So you would want the naming rights of the building. Okay. You know, I sold the first naming rights of this building. I sold that to Mike Copeland, who ran a tech company called Corel Corporation. And they made Corel Draw, if you remember back in the day.
No.
It doesn't matter. It was a very successful company. So this building was called the Corel Center initially, and Mike was paying $1.7 million a year for the naming rights.
Gotcha.
And today it's called the Canadian Tire Centre, and I think they pay around $3.5 or $4 million a year. All right. So there is a tremendous amount of interest in the naming rights for these buildings. Now, there's something else that you need to know, that maybe the Manitoba Moose don't know, but the way a modern arena, including this one, would be built would be quite different. All right. So if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have just told you the story I just told you. But today, what you do is you are now selling more tickets than you have seats. Okay. I want you to understand this, Shawn, because this is a really important economic driver for Manitoba Moose. Okay. Or for the Senators or for the Winnipeg Jets. I'm not sure everybody knows about it because it's very, very, very new.
Okay.
So the way it works is this. A lot of people go to hockey games, not to watch the game, but to socialize.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're now doing, the Sens are doing this and some other teams are doing, is that you have seats here that are club seats. You know, club seats are really nice seats, and you have in-seat service, and you have all kinds of nice features.
Mm-hmm.
But in behind that group of seats is a club area where you include meals and you include booze, and everything is paid for, and people know that when they are buying tickets to this club, that maybe that club area has 500 seats, but you're selling 800 tickets. So at any one time, there's 300 people. They're going to the bathroom. They're sitting there having their dinner. They're watching the game on the big screens instead of actually in the amphitheater, in the arena itself.
Right.
It is, you know, when I first heard about it, this was an architect in Detroit by the name of Matt Rossetti. He's the son of Gino Rossetti. Gino Rossetti was the architect of record for this building, the Canadian Tire Center, and his son, Matt Rossetti, is now probably, I mean, he's a young man, a relatively young man, he'd be your age, maybe a bit older, but not much. Matt Rossetti is probably one of the great thinkers in terms of arena design. And if you were serious about building an 8,000 seat arena, you know, if you reach back to me, I would introduce you to Matt Rossetti. The Rossetti architects, they're based in Detroit, and they are, in my opinion, they are the best. You know, they did the new U.S. Tennis Association facility in Flushing Meadow. I mean, they're world famous now. But back then, Gino was just getting started, and so was I guess. And now 30 or more years have gone by. But Matt has taken over the practice, and he's a brilliant young man. Sometimes the sons of great men are pretty much a washout, but Matt is not. He's really good at what he does. So there are things that you can do on the revenue side that are truly extraordinary. Now, there are a couple other things that you probably have already figured out, and I'll just show you if I can, see if I can get it. Where am I? Let me see if I can go here. So a couple other things that you should know, these are some innovations that we put into the Canadian Tire Center. This is a really good view. Hang on a second. I'll go back to the map, and just give me a second, and I'll show you. Maybe this is a better view. So we did some really cool things. Yeah, this is probably a little bit better. So this building, the Canadian Tire Center, half of the building is in the ground and half of it is above ground. Okay?
Yeah.
And by doing that, you can see all of these entrances here are now at street level. So this has a sports medicine clinic, it has a physiotherapy clinic, it has a YMCA, it has bars and restaurants, and they are double loaded. By if you could sort of see it in your mind's eye, Shawn, by sinking the building halfway in, you've got a concourse here inside the building, and you've got the street here, and you've got stores in between, restaurants. So they have a door to the outside and a door to the inside. They're double loaded.
Yeah.
So when the arena is live, you know, it's not dark. When the arena has an event going on, obviously people can go to the you know, if they need physiotherapy or they want to go to the YMCA or they want to buy a beer at a restaurant or have a meal, they can do that from inside. But when the arena is dark, people can come, and it's just like a shopping center, if you will.
Yeah.
that we call that, that ring is incredibly important. And I'll give you an example. I did some work now quite a few years ago for the Disney company. I knew the CEO of Disney because Mike Eisner served on the NHL Board of Governors when I was there, and he was the chief executive officer of the Disney company, a pretty big company.
Yeah.
And they were renovating the new Amsterdam Theater in Times Square for, I guess, the Lion King. And Mike called me and asked me, he said, I'm not happy with what's going on there. We're way behind schedule, and I don't like the cap rate or the ROI. I don't think he would have known what a cap rate is, but he certainly knew what return on investment is.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't like the ROI. Can you go and have a look at it? And one of the innovations that I introduced was, I mean, they had done some really stupid things. You know, they had their merchandise store on, you know, on like the third level. So you could go up to the third level, you could walk the concourse, and you could go buy some Disney merchandise. And I said to Mr. Eisner and his team, I said, well, this makes no sense. You take that store and bring it down to at grade, and you double load it, just like we did here.
Yeah.
You've got 30 or 40 million visitors a year to Times Square who walk by that new Amsterdam Theater. They can go in and buy, you know, Lion King, you know, T-shirts and music and all the other cool Disney stuff. And so I remember Eisner looking at his design team with very hard eyes. And you can imagine, you know, when the CEO of Disney is not happy with you, probably will be looking for a new job. I didn't want to show anybody up, but he asked me to improve their return on investment, and I was able to do that. That was just one of the many changes that we made. So if this was an arena that was on, you know, on a main street, instead of having it look like this, we would bring it right to the main street. But that entire, you know, ground level of this whole thing would be retail. So it would be restaurants and nightclubs. But the other thing is it would have retail that is resistant to the internet. And if you look at the Canadian Tire Center, you know, we have a sports medicine clinic there. We have a YMCA workout club there. We don't have dress shops, you know, like, or shoe stores, because today, Shawn, if you had you know, I own some retail space. If you have a shoe store or a dress shop, they're probably not open.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you can have professional services there. We have a Palladium insurance company there. So you want to make sure that these are kind of, you know, you could have a dentist there. I mean, you know, hockey players do need dental work from time to time. So, but you know, until the internet or Amazon can drill your teeth and you know, do whatever dental work you need, those dentists are going to be around. So you have to be careful about your mix of users. You don't want to have, but people still like to go, even in this time of the pandemic, they still like to go to you know, to a coffee shop, and maybe they have to, you know, eat their piece of pizza outside, but that's okay. We're Canadian.
Yeah. No, I think it makes all the sense in the world.
So I think you can start with getting control of the land, and you start, then next you talk to the city or the town of City of Thunder Bay, you talk to the Manitoba Moose, you talk to the corporate community, and you start to build real momentum that way.
Yeah, this has been so valuable. Thank you, Bruce. I want to, and I guess, like, as far as, like, you know, you and me working together again, like, what would that look like if that was?
Well, you know, it might help. I mean, I was thinking that it might help if the founder of the Ottawa Senators, you know, was involved. You could, I would do some coaching if you wanted. I'm a little more expensive today than I was, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it's not. I don't charge very much. I like doing it, and so I charge $1,500 a month plus HST.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to coach you. And what I would do, I mean, if you wanted some coaching, and it's just month to month, Shawn. If you needed me for 2 months, then you'd have to budget $1,500 plus HST for 2 months. If you needed me for 6 months, that's fine.
Yeah.
Probably not longer than 6 months, but probably not less than 2. And what we would do is I would help you with every aspect of this because I know how to do it.
Yeah.
And we would do it by Zoom. And you know, certainly when you're briefing city council, for example, briefing the mayor, you know, maybe even convincing a landowner to give you a shot. I would jump on Zoom with you.
Okay.
We would do it together. So I could be, I think, quite helpful, and I'd love to do it. And you know, I think the Manitoba Moose as an anchor tenant would be great. The event stuff, there's all kinds of things that you can do to make your arena more attractive for events. But I'm absolutely sure that I like Thunder Bay. I've done, I think, 2 or 3 keynotes in Thunder Bay.
Yeah, you're mentioning that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like it. And something else you probably already know, small towns in Canada, the United States are absolutely booming.
Why do you say that?
Oh, they're absolutely booming. Did you see that at the height of the pandemic in New York, 40% of the rich dudes in Manhattan left?
Right.
All around Toronto, all around Ottawa, Vancouver, all around New York City, Boston, Austin, you know, places where I'm coaching, Los Angeles. People who can now work remotely are leaving these big cities in incredible numbers. I have a client I coach. He is in a small town called Calabogie Peaks. I think population is like 2,000 people. And he was selling homes, you know, maybe he was selling 8 or 10, you know, a year. And I started coaching him, and we've been selling 32 townhomes or condos every 60 days since COVID started.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know, he thinks I walk on water, but it had, you know, it had a little bit to do with me, because we did change his marketing a little bit, and we did some tweaking of the designs, but really it was 85%, you know, just people are, you know, listen, would you want to be in a 30 or 40 or 50 story building in downtown Ottawa during COVID-19?
No.
You know, just to go and get a liter of milk, you have to go down 50 stories in an elevator. You don't know, you could get sick just on your way down or your way up. And you can't, you know, even you, Shawn, would find walking up 50 flights of stairs is a chore. And somebody, I'm 68 now, you know, I mean, I'll walk 10 flights of stairs, but I'm not walking 50.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm telling you, Thunder Bay, I think Winnipeg will do very well. It's obviously much bigger than Thunder Bay, but I think Thunder Bay will do well. All of the small towns that I told you about, or of the cities I mentioned, are around LA and Austin and others, are seeing incredible upticks. People are going to work from home, and they're going to have a completely different lifestyle.
Well, this has been super. I think I'll take you up on your offer. Let me kind of get sorted here. We're not going to start this right away as far as the coaching. I think I want to digest a little bit.
Yeah, I know you're careful. You think about it. What I'll do after we'll end the call now, and I'll download this video. I'll upload it to YouTube. The only people who have the link will be you and me. And
Right.
if you need some help, reach back to me. I'd love to help.
I will, Bruce. I really will. It's great to see your face.
Awesome to see you too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.